This is what minor conflict looks like. This is not going to stop in our lifetimes. But what starts here, sometimes it escalates to this. And nobody wants to be here. Something happens to us in this mode, and almost uncontrollably, we want to defeat, we want to subjugate, we want to humiliate the other person. It's the way we all are. And we don't want to be here. We don't want to be here. This is a depiction of conflict between countries. Point to any two neighboring countries and I'll give you a history of conflict. It's not going to end in our lifetimes. But what starts here sometimes escalates to this. And nobody, no citizen, no leaders, no children, no adults, nobody wants to be here. Today's talk then is about us being able to create in our minds, to visualize a red line that separates minor conflict, which is inevitable, mostly unavoidable, and to separate it from major conflict, that we will find a way of not getting there. Today's talk is about taking a look at how monumental leaders in history harnessed respect and empathy as a strategy, not a philosophy or goodwill alone, as a strategy to manage and handle conflict. How did they prevent their citizens from crossing the red line, from converting their countries into rivers of blood? That's what we are going to look at today. In fact, if you can imagine it, they're going to be here and they are going to tell you what they did. And there is no reason why any of us in this room cannot be inspired and follow their example. We're going to use them as case studies, as competence models. The entire argument rests on a premise that a characteristic of major conflict is a complete absence of respect and empathy. When we are in major conflict, we don't respect each other and we cannot think or feel like the other. Therefore, as a corollary, on the opposite side of the coin, it is feasible to think of empathy and respect as a strategy for achieving an imperfect peace. We're never going to have no minor conflict. But this is good enough to specifically think strategically, how can we harness empathy, how can we harness respect? Because we want an imperfect peace around us. This then is my entire presentation in one slide. This is the entire argument. Now, today I'm going to use a formula. In public speaking, which has been around for thousands of years, there is a well-established, tried and tested formula. Tell a story to make a point memorable. That is the formula that storytellers have used, that speakers have used for thousands of years. And today I'm going to modify it just a bit. We will use a video which elicited a lot of emotion from me and made a point which I could not forget. So we will watch a video to reveal a point, to help us to build a strategy of respect and empathy for everyone. So with this setup, my task is clear. I am not so much a speaker, though I will be speaking. I am someone who has invited guests here. I'm going to moderate it. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to hear what they say. I'm going to summarize it in a context that suits us in a chamber of commerce. And then I'm going to have what we call a discuss and debrief. And I want you to imagine, now I know you are all just awesome, but you've had or you do have or you will have an enemy. And if you can see that enemy, really see that enemy now, this presentation will serve you better. So if you have someone you dislike or an enemy, just visualize that person now. Any saints out here?
Just one?
You're going to be transformed by the time this is done. All right, our first case study is South Africa. February 1990, Nelson Mandela gets released from jail. And everything was set for this country to go up in flames. If you think we have it bad here, it was terrible there. And yet somehow, in 4 years, they went to democratic one-person, one-vote elections. This is a case study. We're going to try to figure out what they did. The source I'm using is from a documentary called Miracle Rising. Go to YouTube. I encourage you to see the whole video. It is marvelous. We're going to use some clips from it. So when you see this, there's a video coming. We're going to now be introduced just thematically to what happened in South Africa. I'm going to summarize quick now. I'm going to summarize quick. There is a red line. It is on you as a citizen to have a clear line beyond which I will not cross. Here it is. If you're in major conflict, respect and empathy is absent. Therefore, a strategy, a deliberate strategy, is the way to go. Fight the battle of dignity from the very first day. From the very first day. Insist on everyone being respected. This was Nelson Mandela to Oprah Winfrey. Respect before reacting. Mac Maharaj from jail. In a conflict, you must respect your adversary. Look beyond the label. You all have all brought this up. So this is the summary. You all have summarized it once. Here we are again. Look at the person. Who is this person? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And here's the answer. If you can do this, you will be well served in life. It doesn't matter whether you have fun, whether you use foul language, whatever it is. If it is done in this context, you will be successful. This is the formula. Learn the language of your enemies. So try to learn lots of languages, not just English, but even technical languages, project management languages. The more you learn, the more you'll be able to get along. Get into their heads, figure out what they're thinking before reacting. Get around a table peacefully. How many of you making a commitment right now, that person that you visualized, you're going to get around a table peacefully? Come on, everyone put your hands up. No one? I have to be more persuasive. No, you got to do it. You take the initiative and get together around a table peacefully. Because this is what it takes. To make peace, you have to talk to your enemies, not your friends. Maybe as citizens, we should insist on this with our politicians. Seriously, just as a matter of citizen policy. Meeting outside the informal, it helps magnificently. Use the coffee breaks to get to know one another. People will develop warmth in informal interactions. To dissect the root of a problem, go off the record. Say, just tell me, I will not tell another person in the world. Tell me what's going on. It's a bit risky because you're expected to reveal everything to your team. But this is the way to do it. And Sawubona from Zulu. Be able to look at someone and say, I see you. We're going to go to our final video. It's called A Strategy of Peace. This is John F. Kennedy. It's a small segment of his talk that he gave after the Cuban Missile Crisis at the American University speech. It's called A Strategy of Peace. And actually, I borrowed the title from my talk also, A Strategy of Respect and Empathy. In 1962, in October, for 13 days, the world came to a crisis of which there has been no parallel. And by and large, it is acknowledged that we had reached a point where the slightest miscalculation, the slightest miscommunication would have triggered a nuclear annihilation. I remember. So the Cuban Missile Crisis is considered to be the 13 most dangerous days through which we have ever lived. So they both launched campaigns for peace. And they had their hawks to deal with, and they had the usual politics to deal with. But Kennedy launched his campaign for peace with this speech in American University. June 10th, 1963 is considered to be the day that people began pulling back from the abyss. It is considered to be the turning point in the Cold War, the stepping back from a nuclear abyss. And history records this as acts of great political courage and great political grace. So let's listen to the way a president of the United States, that time Soviets and the United States were mortal enemies. They could not stand each other, and everything was a provocation. And yet John F. Kennedy, he encourages Americans to think about things from the Russians' point of view. It's a small segment of a very important speech.
And second, let us re-examine our attitude towards the Soviet Union. It is discouraging to think that their leaders may actually believe what their propagandists write. It is discouraging to read a recent authoritative Soviet text on military strategy and find on page after page wholly baseless and incredible claims. Yet it is sad to read these Soviet statements to realize the extent of the gulf between us. But it is also a warning to the American people not to fall into the same trap as the Soviets, not to see only a distorted and desperate view of the other side, not to see conflict as inevitable, accommodation as impossible, and communication as nothing more than an exchange of threats. No government or social system is so evil that its people must be considered as lacking in virtue. As Americans, we find communism profoundly repugnant as a negation of personal freedom and dignity. But we can still hail the Russian people for their many achievements in science and space, in economic and industrial growth, in culture, in acts of courage. And no nation in the history of battle ever suffered more than the Soviet Union in the Second World War. At least 20 million lost their lives. Countless millions of homes and families were burned or sacked. A third of the nation's territory, including 2/3 of its industrial base, was turned into a wasteland, a loss equivalent to the destruction of this country east of Chicago. So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal.
Practically, it can be done, it has been done, it is on us to make sure that this happens everywhere. So here's the eternal question. You can't stop asking yourself, how do we avoid crossing the line where we stop caring what we do to one another? Here is an eternal answer. Respect, simple respect, and empathize with your enemy. Empathizing with your friend is easy. Empathize with your enemy is essential. Here is the formula. On you, uphold your dignity in a way that compels all around you to respect you. All right, so I'm going to close with 4 challenges. Why do we take on these challenges? Not because they're easy, but because they are essential. And I can give you many gifts and you can give me many gifts. I can motivate you, you can motivate me. I can inspire you, you can inspire me. But a greater gift I can give you is to expect the world from you and you expect the world. High expectations are gifts that we can give each other too. Now is the time to think of that enemy of yours. And now is the time to challenge yourself. 1. We take on these challenges as a strategy because they are essential. Look at that person and see that person and say, I see you. Because you have high expectations of yourself, you are willing to take on this challenge. Respect your enemy. Have high expectations for yourself. Respect your enemy. Challenge yourself to respect your enemy. Challenge yourself to empathize with your enemy. Not because it is easy, but because it is essential. And finally, uphold your dignity in a way that compels all around you to respect you.